Video from my 2017 trip to Cabo Pulmo in Baja California. Cabo Pulmo is a beautiful location, and as you can see from this map, it's about 60 miles away from Cabo San Lucas. It's located just at the mouth of the Sea of Cortez, and is one of Mexico's real success stories when it comes to conservation. Cabo Pulmo was heavily overfished until it was declared a marine park in 1995. And since then, the biomass levels in Cabo Pulmo have increased by 400%. What you're seeing here is what Cabo Pulmo's known best for. It's a giant school, a giant bait ball, for lack of better words, of jacks. Now, these are significantly larger fish than what normally comprises a bait ball. A normal bait ball is filled with sardines or other smaller schooling fish that are maybe 6-8 inches long, 12 at most. These jacks are significantly larger, and due to the wide-angle nature of the lens that I was using, it's hard to get a true sense of the scale of this ball. Each one of these jacks is easily 1.5 to 2 feet long, and there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of them, that form beautiful swirling clouds and tornadoes of life. You'll see a couple of shots where there's another diver in the scene, just to give you a idea of the scale of some of these schools. We were only able to find the school of jacks once. It was so obvious that you could actually see it from the surface in the form of a giant black shadow just beneath the waves. The school moves somewhat, but it tends to stay in the northern corner of the park. The park is rather small. There's only 3 or 4 really good dive sites that the guides recommended that we hit each time. One is the northwestern corner of the park where this school is located, and another is a wreck, which you'll see soon. In the southern region of the park, there's a pinnacle, which is supposedly also very good to dive, along with a small sea lion colony of California sea lions. This was a stop that we made. We only did 6 dives here on our way to the Socorro Islands, and talking to the guides, that's a real common thing for tourists to do. You make a stop at Cabo Pulmo, which is just outside of Cabo San Lucas, and then you meet up with your boat to head to Socorro's. Here you see the one and only Shipwreck that's in the area, and this was probably my favorite site. It's covered in schooling grunts, but there's a huge variety of life here as well. The amount of life demonstrates just why I love diving shipwrecks so much. Usually they're found in, patchy sand areas, and they form an oasis for life, and this was no exception. The wreck's pretty heavily deteriorated, but one of my favorite things was it was home to what seemed like a school of porcupine pufferfish. Here you can see 5, 6, 7, 8 pufferfish all within just a few yards of each other. I've never seen a congregation of pufferfish like this, and I thought it was really neat. They were beautiful. There were also several varieties of pufferfish, including the traditional porcupine, as well as a black spotted puffer that we saw on occasion. You can see it here in the background. We dove the wreck twice, and both dives were demonstrably different. On this dive, we had a very large stingray visit us. And on the second dive, I found a much smaller, much more inquisitive round ray. It let me follow it for quite some time and get some really great photos. One of my other favorite parts of the wreck is the field of garden eels. I love garden eels. As you approach them, they duck down into their holes, and when you back off, they raise themselves back up. One of the most interesting parts of diving the wreck were the 2 bull sharks that we encountered that were circling the wreck. Now, I've dove with bull sharks before, but that was a baited dive. This wasn't. They were out and about of their own volition. So it makes you a little nervous doing your 20-foot safety stop, seeing bull sharks circling just a few feet below. Another interesting fact about Cabo Pulmo is that it is actually the northernmost coral reef in the Pacific Ocean. Now, the corals here aren't as lush as you may see in places like Hawaii, but they're there and they're beautiful. Here's one of those black-spotted puffer I mentioned earlier. The coral reefs, like the shipwrecks, are also home to vast schools of fish. Here's a large school of grunts. There were also various angel and butterfly fish all over the reef. Some of them were a little more camera shy than others. Here's a big school of grouper, along with several free-swimming moray eels. This was something that we saw multiple times on the reef. In California, they tend to stay in their holes, but here they would free swim more often than not. I don't know why the difference in the behavior. There were also various needlefish and trumpetfish in the area. I'm not quite sure what species this was, but it was very neat. This is the largest triggerfish that I saw on the trip. It was gnawing with a zeal on the reef, and surrounded by, I believe, is a king angelfish. That was one of the most beautiful fish that I had seen. Here again were more schooling grouper. Another somewhat uncommon phenomenon. And this really got me excited. It's the first seahorse I've ever seen. It's very well camouflaged, but you can see it right in the center of the screen. Super cool.